I love brewing a bag, and best of all, I love the beer I make while using the BIAB method. And while getting started is pretty simple, there are a few quirks to the process that can be tricky. So today I'm going to show you my top 10 tips to make brewing in a bag a whole lot easier. I'm TheBruSho, and this is TheBruSho. Let's talk brew in a bag tips. Before we jump in, I want to let you know that all the items I discuss are linked in the description for you to find. But if you have any questions, be sure to let me know. And if you love these tips and tricks videos, hit the like button so I know you want to see more. Now, let's get into it with tip number 1. Number 1, pick the right bag. This one's for the newbies who haven't started brewing a bag. Before going out to get the bag, first consider the size of bag you need. It's actually pretty easy to find out. Just take a tape measure and find the width of the opening and the height of your kettle. Then just search for a brew bag that's bigger than the size of your kettle. Really, you just want to avoid having a bag too small for your kettle. It'll make life hard. I'll show you in a bit how to fix bags that are too big. As far as materials go, find a good heat resistant one. I use a nylon bag and I haven't had any issues with burning or melting. Just read some reviews and then make your choice. They aren't that expensive, but if you feel like going for a more premium product, then the brew bag seems to be a popular choice. Just remember, the bag doesn't make the beer, you do. Number 2, double crush. One of the benefits of brewing a bag is that you don't have to worry too much about grain crush size. On other systems, if you crush too fine, you'll end up with a stuck sparge or mash, which means you'll have trouble moving the wort around. With brewing a bag, you have a larger liquid to grain ratio, which means no issues with the mash gumming up, but also means you can crush super fine, even running the grain through the mill twice. Science tells us that by doing this, you'll make more of the grain's starchy bits available during the mash to be converted into sugars, effectively increasing your overall mash efficiency. Now we're only talking a couple percent, but if you're noticing low efficiency numbers, definitely take a look at crushing more fine. If you don't have a mill of your own, then just run it through the home brew store mill twice. Probably a good idea no matter what, since who knows what setting it's on or how old that mill is. Number 3, clips on clips. Clips are your brew bag friend. You can think of them like a second pair of hands. You've probably seen the old binder clip trick to keep your bag in place. It's great for when you're adding in grains or if your bag is too big, but you're not just limited to binder clips. These ones from Dollar Tree are good, and you get a bunch in a pack. Or some A-clamps like this are perfect if you need a really tight grip. Sometimes I even use the A-clamps to lift up the bag off the bottom as I'm heating up the mash. Or you can clip on wort chillers, tubing, there's a bunch of uses. Clips, get them, have them around for whatever may come up. Number 4, thermometer on the kettle. A good thermometer is key to any mash, but having to constantly check with a hand thermometer is a pretty maddening task to do. You should be off sipping a homebrew, but instead you're lifting the lid of the kettle and letting all that precious heat escape. And really, how far down can you get with a hand thermometer? There's no way to get a good sense of the entire mash temp. Most brew kettles have a port or two on them, and dedicating one to a thermal well or thermometer is a great idea. Usually they're not designed to stick out too far or be too sharp that they punch a hole in your bag, and then all you need to do is take a quick glance and move on. But if your kettle doesn't have a port, you can always add one if you're handy with a welder, or just buy one of these long deep fry thermometers. Or even better, a digital grill thermometer. You can set temp alarms on some of them, which would be great for mashing. Now we're talking. Number 5, keep it insulated. Probably one of the biggest drawbacks to brewing a bag is the lack of insulation kettles can have. It can be kind of frustrating to start a mash at your perfect temp and then 15 minutes later, it's dropped 10 degrees. The first step is to leave the lid on as much as possible to trap the heat. Luckily I live in SoCal, so the ambient air is pretty warm most days, and I don't lose too much heat. But on the occasional cool day, I have a way to keep things consistent. Grab some heavy blankets, or even winter coats are great insulators. And then some bungee cords. Once you hit your target mash temp, kill the heat. That way you don't set your wife's favorite jacket on fire. And wrap the kettle up tight, top and all sides, securing it with the bungee cables. If you want, you can keep the thermometer poking out so you know where you're at. For short mashes, this works great, and you probably won't need to turn the heat on again. But for longer mashes, you might need to take all the insulation off and then heat it up to your target mash temp and repeat the process. Or you can always dish out some extra cash for an insulated boil kettle. Speaking of keeping the mash temp consistent, number 6, stir it up. As the mash sits, the temperature will start dropping slowly, but not in a consistent way. You may see that the top of the mash cools down faster, or that the outer part of the kettle cools faster than the middle, and temperatures might be different throughout, depending on the grain, which can kind of mess up your overall mash temp. The best way to fix this is to stir up the mash. Not only does this help evenly distribute the heat, it will ensure that the grain gets fully absorbed. This will help you get a good extraction of sugars and boost your efficiency slightly as well. Usually I give a stir every 15 to 20 minutes if I feel like it needs it. It's a simple trick that can go a long way. Number 7. Draining the bag. At the end of the mash, it's time to pull out the grains. Other styles of brewing use gravity or pumps to move the wort from the grains. But not us BIABers.
We use brute strength. We don't hit the gym. We hit the brewery for our workouts. With Brew in a bag, you too can get swole. Order now.
But really it can get pretty tough to lift with the grains holding onto moisture and weighing up to 20 pounds. So before you go lifting and breaking your back, it's a good idea to have a strategy on getting it out. Pulleys are a great system if you have the capabilities. They reduce the amount of work you need by half, if not more, depending on how elaborate your system is. You just need a good anchor point above where your kettle is. If pulleys aren't an option, then I've found that these cookie cooling racks are an easy solution. The key is to find a quality one that won't bend or break under the weight. I found this one on sale at Home Goods, and I've used it for dozens and dozens of batches. The benefit of both of these options is that you can rest the bag right above the kettle and let all of that sweet goodness drip back into the kettle. And you can even sparge with more water if you want, and it goes right in. Easy peasy. Number 8. Squeeze it. It's time to clear the air once and for all. People, it's okay to squeeze your bag. This is a safe space. No one will judge you. Okay, maybe some people will, if you randomly tell them you squeeze your bag. But I won't, because squeezing the bag does not hurt your beer. It won't extract tannins or astringency, and it ensures you get the most wort into the kettle as possible. Here's how to do it properly. Either you buy heat-proof gloves, so you can actually hand squeeze it without burning your fingerprints off, or you can use the lid of the kettle and press down on the bag. I guess that's more like pressing the bag instead of squeezing. But anyway, it works especially great if you use the cooling rack trick. And the lid saves you from getting burnt. Yay to no burns on brew day. Number 9. Full volume versus sparge. If you have a large enough kettle, you have the benefit of doing a full volume mash, meaning all the water needed plus all the grains can fit into your kettle without it overflowing. This makes brewing really simple. Sometimes you don't have enough space. Maybe it's because you're brewing a big gravity beer and you're using a ton of grains, or maybe you just have a small kettle. Whatever the reason, the solution is simple. Just take out the amount of water that you're over on and use it in the sparge. Using a brewing software, you can get an estimate of how much kettle space you need. In this example, I need 8.05 gallons, but my kettle is only 8 gallons. So I'll just take about 1 gallon out of my water at the start and save it for the sparge later. Give yourself a little wiggle room. You don't want to fill the kettle up to exactly full. You can make it a bit nerve-wracking when stirring. Or if all else fails, brew a slightly smaller batch. But who wants less beer? Not me. Number 10. Dump and clean. Lastly, if you want to prolong the life of your bag, you need to be on top of how you care for it. It's your little brew baby. It was just out playing and getting dirty all day. So as soon as you're done, dump out its diaper and give it a good wash. And by that, I mean pour out the grains and wash it with a hose as soon as possible. If you've ever smelt old grains, you can only imagine how the brew bag might smell if you left it hanging around for too long. Not only that, but it can start to grow some nasty bacteria very quickly. Washing it with water will get most of the grains off, and then I just air dry it. Once it's dry, you can shake off any remaining grain particles, and then just fold it up for later use. If it's way nasty, you can always soak it in boiling water for a bit to get it clean again. But your bag will never be pristine white again after you use it. Eventually, every bag will slowly degrade, getting little snags or rips. It'll be a sad day for sure, as you think back on all the fond memories you had. But then you remember that they're super cheap, so you just toss it and get a brand spanking new one, so you can keep on brewing. Such is the way of a brew in a bagger. And now that you know my tips and tricks, you too are ready to become an expert BIAB brewer. Did I miss any other great tips? Be sure to let me know in the comments so we can all learn. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to hit subscribe on your way out. Happy brewing, and cheers!